Welcome to the All Hoops podcast. I'm your host, Steve Inman, joined as always by co-host and producer to the stars, Chris Brito. The Knicks are playing their best basketball in a long time, and Chris and I are going to discuss the ceiling of this team. Kawhi Leonard has also gotten a mega contract extension out of nowhere, and unfortunately, Ja Morant is done for the year. So are the Grizzlies based on that. Before we get to that, Chris, we have a lot to get to, but first, how are you?
Hey Stevie, happy to be here on the All Hoops podcast. Um, let's talk about these Knicks. Let's talk about how they've been dominating since they've started the new year. Um, so far, they are 5-0 in 2024. Coincidentally, they're also 5-0 because they've traded for OG Anunoby, who has been a huge difference maker on the team. He had just fit better than RJ ever did. You see more motion on the offense. You see the guys running up and down the court, more threes, um, and it just provides more spacing. And I think we're seeing that with OG, him being so lethal from the corner. I think we're seeing a new sort of Knicks offense that's been unleashed. Granted, three of those five opponents have been teams that are destined to be lottery teams. But the Timberwolves, are the one of the best teams in the West, and the Sixers, one of the top three teams in the East. Um, we beat them. We beat the Sixers convincingly, and we held a big lead over the Wolves during our game with them. So a lot of encouraging signs. What do you feel most encouraged by specifically,
Yeah,
Steve?
to me, Chris, it's two things. First, it's the shooting. I don't think that the hot shooting is going to continue forever, but like they're all hitting their threes. Like everybody's hitting their threes. Deuce McBride has entered this rotation fresh off a 3-year, $13 million contract extension. He's hitting threes. OG Anunoby, who you mentioned, is actually shooting slightly less than he did in Toronto, right? Uh, but his numbers are way up in terms of his percentages. He's shooting about 55% from the floor, 45.5% from three. Uh, I don't think that's going to continue. He's not the greatest three-point shooter of all time, but at the same time, if he, even if he goes back to what his numbers were before in Toronto, that's a pretty good player, pretty efficient player. And the Knicks are doing a great job of just running in transition. So a lot of these threes are wide open. They're not a lot of contested threes. They're not a lot of difficult shots. Most of them are really good shots. And I want to give more credit there to Julius Randle as well, because his 3-point shooting has really kind of he's really limited how many shots he's taking there. He's attacking the rim, and instead of barreling into a double team and taking an offensive charge, he is making quality decisions. He's making good, reads on the floor. And I think it comes down to two things. One, he's just getting really comfortable in this offense. And the other thing, I think is probably the most important thing, is he's trusting his teammates. When we first got Julius Randle, his teammates were like rookie RJ Barrett and like Elfrid Payton were his like two wings, right? Now he's got an all-star, and yes, I say all-star, he better make that all-star team Jalen Brunson. He's got OG Anunoby, who I said is, as you said, shooting basically half his shots are going in. More than half his shots are going in from the floor. Almost half of them from three are going in. Quentin Grimes is hitting his threes. McBride is hitting his threes. Um, DiVincenzo has been red hot since joining the starting lineup. So everyone's hitting their shots, and Julius Randle's trusting them. And so for that reason, he's making great decisions. He should be an all-star as well. And so they're running and they're hitting their shots, and everyone's making good decisions. That's a recipe not just for success, but for a deep playoff run.
So I think you hit many great points, and obviously we've spoken about how three-point shooting is essentially like one of the more important benchmarks as a team as you try to compete for the top tiers in this league. But I think the one thing you can control, which has been one of the more promising aspects of this team, has been how they've played so well defensively, right? You know, they've I believe I read that they're allowing the least amount of points since the new year. And obviously that's in part because of OG. And I think that's something that you could sustain as opposed to the 3-point shooting, which, as you know, comes in waves and valleys and peaks. So I think moving forward, how do you make this team better? I think you need to give Hardenstein a backup
He's
that,
been great too. We didn't mention him. He's
right.
been fantastic.
He's been fantastic. And in some ways, he's unlocked this offense better than Mitch ever could. Because you still get the offensive rebounding, you still get the rebound defensive rebounding as well. You get a quality defender who still blocks shots without really like without becoming a liability on the offense.
I
So
mean, just really quick, you mentioned his rebounding, right? Here's his rebounding the last in this 5 game stretch, right? He started with the first game, Minnesota, 9 rebounds. Then Chicago, 20 rebounds. 6 rebounds in Philly, 19 rebounds in Washington, and then 14 in their win over Portland. So like he's doing what Mitch did and then some. Offensively, he's been fantastic. You know, he's helping move the ball. And then defensively, I think it's really the big shock. He's blocking shots, he's getting steals, he's contesting guys at the rim. You saw literally right away in that Minnesota game, Rudy Gobert attacked him a couple of times, thinking, I'm the alpha here. And he got his shot blocked hard, straight up, more than once. And it was really a sight to see. And so for one, he's putting himself in a position where it's going to be very difficult for the Knicks to re-sign him without committing to him as the long-term starter. But that's a problem for another day. As you said, now the question is about finding a backup for him. I am willing to give Precious Achiuwa some of those minutes for now and see if he can emerge into a presence down low. I think you and I both kind of agree we don't think that's going to happen, but I'm willing to give it until the trade deadline to see before saying, okay, we need to go add another center.
yeah, and I think this is all contingent on that, like to see if there's anything. The value I do see in Precious Achua is that when he's been inserted in the lineup and the other team doesn't have an intimidating big man who can score, it just gives the Knicks a really fun, switchable look where you have Precious, you have Randall, you have Grimes, you have, I believe, McBride and Precious. I mean, and OG. Those guys are just like all switchable. Those guys can guard probably mostly 1 through 5. Kind of a fun lineup. I'm assuming that's probably the reason why they got Precious. Um, but the issue you run into is that if you make a deep run, you'll face the likes of the Sixers, you'll face the likes of maybe the Nuggets, and you need guys who can sort of like at least, you know, put up a fight against a guy like Jokic and Embiid. Not to say that Hardenstein didn't do great against Embiid the other night, but Embiid is still recovering from an injury.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like the ceiling of this team, you kind of just said it there. Like you mentioned the D word, Denver, in there. I'm not that far yet, but at the same time, this team can go on a run. I think really only Boston and Milwaukee are really the only teams in the East I would definitively say should be favored against the Knicks right now. If the playoffs started today. And obviously things can change. Guys are going to get injured. Some guys are going to improve. But right now, I put the Knicks third right there. I think they're right there with Philly. And, you know, we've seen Embiid kind of tire as the season goes on, as you get into those, you know, postseason months. I would trust the Knicks in that series right now, believe it or not. So it's just crazy because for the most part, this is the same team that went to the playoffs. They swapped in quickly and Barrett for OG Anunoby, right?
And
But
DiVincenzo.
and DiVincenzo. So it's a 2 for 2 more or less swap. But offensively, I'm just so much more confident in this team and getting quality looks, getting good shots. The thing I said when that Miami series, I kind of said it a little bit going into the Cleveland series. I just thought they didn't have enough firepower to compete with these top teams in the East. I think they do have that now. And we'll see. if that's the case. But right now, the Knicks fans, like even the ones who are more pessimistic than most, we got to enjoy this. We got to enjoy this right now. This next couple months is going to be a lot of fun.
I agree, Steve. The ones who are more pessimistic should enjoy this. Yes.
Everyone should enjoy this right now. It's been especially, you always compare it to the past, right? And it has
Mhm.
not been a fun past for the Knicks in our, 15, 20 years following this team. But for the most part, this to me is one of the better stretches they've had. And I think it's going to continue. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
I think why this run is so like special is because of how dominant they look.
Yeah.
Like like even that Wolves game, they were up 20. Even even with that Sixers game, they led through most of that game. They essentially dominated the Wizards and the other two teams that they played. It's escaping me right now.
Portland,
But Portland, right?
Chicago.
Chicago. Chicago was a little closer. Um, I don't know. I'm just so encouraged by what I'm seeing and like just the way the ball moves. Um, I think that if you think about the other top three teams, like they're vulnerable, right? They're not invincible. Is I think the bigger thing, right? Like the Celtics, you know, they're probably the favorites right now, but right now I feel like we match up a lot better than we did a month ago. The Bucks seem to be imploding or can't figure out their defense. The Sixers, always have the Embiid injury shadow over their heads no matter how far they get. So those are things to sort of keep in mind as we move forward.
Yeah, no, it's going to be fascinating. And the Eastern Conference playoffs, who would have thought it's going to be, as always, must watch TV. Going over to the West, Chris, we right before our show, we were planning our show notes, right? And we got a tweet from the Clippers saying, by the way, we've extended Kawhi Leonard. It was something that came out of nowhere. There was no whoosh bomb. There was no Shams report. Literally, the team announced this, and it's a 3-year extension for Kawhi. Takes him through 2027. 152.4 million. So right now he's 32. He'll be 33 in June, and this is going to take him through 36. Chris, is this a good idea for the Clippers?
I think it's what they needed to do. I think this move was more out of necessity than out of the team really wanting Leonard to be a part of their future. Like I think we're in what year three or year four of Kawhi in LA? Oh, whatever. Point being, they only have a Western
This
Conference.
is year 5. The third year he didn't play at all. So it's like his fourth season playing, fifth season
Got it.
with the Clippers.
So, okay, so year five, they have a Western Conference finals appearance out of it where Leonard was injured.
He got injured midway through that playoff. So did George.
Right. So is this team better than the Nuggets, Wolves?
I
I don't.
think to me, they have the upside to be the second best team in the West.
Mhm.
Uh, they've fooled me so many times that I'm almost afraid saying it. Like I picked them a year and a half ago, you
Last
know,
year, I think.
to be the whole champs. I picked not like this latest season, but the season before.
Yeah.
Uh, they look amazing. Everyone's shooting well. They've really figured out with James Harden as the point guard, how do you get pick and rolls going again, which is not something they were doing before. Kawhi looks engaged. Kawhi kind of frankly just looks happy. I've not seen Kawhi happy ever. And so this is really a sight to see. I think they're going to try to get a deal done with Paul George next. And as you said, like this makes me nervous. You're giving a guy in his mid 30s with one of the longest injury histories of any pro athlete we have in the game right now. You're giving him 50 plus million a year on a 3-year extension. It's terrifying, but I don't really see the alternative. I think he kind of had to do this.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why I think they're doing this because they're opening a new arena soon. in Englewood, and
next year.
that's gonna be. I think they want that continuity heading in. And you say it all the time. You can sell two things: hope. Wait, what is it? Success or hope? Right now, they're sort of banking on a little bit of both, but I think having
You
a
got to be able to sell to your fans and your ownership one of two things: success or hope.
or hope, right?
And so right now they're selling success. And hey, we've had success. We're going to keep doing this. We got to keep the band together. Now I think they're going to try to do this with, Paul George. And thank God for them that they can't extend Harden right now. Because if Harden sees this, right, he sees this big deal and goes, okay, I got to get mine now. I'm the reason why we've turned this around. He's not like able to get a contract extension because he opted into his contract with the Sixers. So he has to wait till after the season. They can evaluate how he looks after the postseason, where he's always kind of at his worst. If he has a big postseason, I think they're gonna have no problem giving him a very similar deal than the one Kawhi just got. If he doesn't, that's what makes it interesting. What's going to happen with James Harden?
I tend to think that so we're recording this Wednesday late or early evening rather. I think Paul George doesn't resign with the team.
Wow.
Um, this is not based off anything. I just think he's the type of guy who may want to look at something else. And I
Well, I think
and
we'll
I
see
think
based on how
and
they
I think
play, right? Go ahead.
and I think that place could be New York.
They don't have the money. They're giving Paul George money to OG.
Just saying, man.
Okay.
He's a former Leon Rose client.
There are a lot of those.
All right, that's a little conspiratorial on my end, but
You want to tell me Paul George is leaving the Clippers? That's not crazy. I think he'll resign. I think he's gonna actually resign in the next couple of weeks, but that's not crazy. But I think it's gonna be like a team like the Miami Heat or something like that. I don't
yeah,
think it's gonna
it might,
I just don't think the
it might
Knicks
be.
financially have the money. He's
Maybe.
also a guy who's going to be 34 in a couple of months.
Oh my
Like,
God. Yeah.
that's the kind of guy the Knicks normally sign, but they don't have the money.
I mean, this is a man who's clearly thinking about his post basketball career anyway.
Why do you say that?
I mean, he's already starting about his he has a podcast on. It's really
So
successful
does
right
half the
now.
league now, but go ahead.
Well, what?
So does half the league.
That's true.
He's played
I don't
well
know.
this year.
I mean, I don't know. I just feel like I wonder at what end Paul George is going to say, like, I want to see something else. But
Well, he's from California, and they're playing their best basketball since he got there 5 years ago. So I would think if this continues,
mhm.
which so far it looks like it will, he'll want to stay there. I don't know where he thinks I don't see him saying the grass is going to be greener somewhere else. Especially because, as you said, and as every other media person has said, the Clippers are kind of desperate right now because they're hosting this new arena next year. They're starting this new arena. So like the time to give a 34-year-old Paul George money is not going to be this summer with a smart team like the Heat. It's probably going to be this Clipper team that's like, we really need to have a product for these fans as we try to chip away a tiny bit of Laker Nation in LA and move as we move to Inglewood. I don't think that's going to work the way they think it's going to work. It's a Laker town. It's always been a Laker town, just like New York is always a Knick town. But at the same time, I think that's what they're going to do. So I think they're going to give him this $50 million extension. You're going to have those two guys making 100 million, and then you figure out what the heck do we do with James Harden. So it's going to be very fascinating. The Clippers, as always, are very fascinating.
Oh, hell yes. Um, anyway, I think the Clippers are going to be an interesting team this year. Um, hopefully, maybe they'll make a run. Who knows? Maybe they'll face the Knicks in the
Fair enough.
NBA Finals. Who knows?
All right, Chris, that's some good stuff there. Let's get to our final thoughts here. Unfortunately, Ja Morant is done for the year. He had, it was a shoulder injury. It seemed like something they didn't really think was that serious. They go to get him an MRI and they realize, wait, this is actually very serious. He's done for the year. You've seen how they played without him to start the year, the first 25 games. I think they were 6-19. So I'm officially declaring their season over. They have a terrible record. Now they lost Ja again. What do you think they should do at the deadline?
I'm of the belief that they should sell guys that they don't see as part of their future. Um, maybe that's Marcus Smart, maybe it's not, but Marcus Smart would definitely make sense on a team that's heading toward the playoffs. Um, I think it's in the Grizzlies' best interest to sort of, I don't want the T word, tank, just because their building blocks are so young. You add a fourth guy that can be really good. It's going to be a team that's going to be one of the best. They're already one of the best with Ja.
Yeah, I mean, there's been talk of like, should they move Marcus Smart? Should they move some of these other pieces? I think the answer is no. I think they should, unfortunately, they're kind of where the Cincinnati Bengals were in football. It's just kind of a lost year. You come into the year with all these expectations. You have this immediate setback, Joe Burrow, Ja Morant. Um, it seemed like they're finally starting to pick it up and they're starting to right the ship, and then boom, their superstar goes down for the year. And that's kind of where they are. They don't really have a lot of upcoming free agents. I think the only one is really Luke Kennard, who's a nice shooter. That's probably a guy I would be interested in moving and saying, can we get a first round pick back for him? Um, I think you might be able to. He's an expiring contract. He's a good shooter. There's
For
not a
Luke
lot of
Kennard,
teams. What?
for Luke
He's a good
Kennard.
for you could probably get like the 23rd pick in the draft, probably in a bad draft for Luke Kennard. I think that's something I would explore and see if that's possible. Other than that, I'm probably just gonna hold tight. As you said, if there's a guy who kind of fits their long-term table, I might be interested in buying. I don't know who that guy is. Um, People were speculating like Pascal Siakam. Like that doesn't make sense to me. I think no rentals. It got to be a guy that you can plan on being with Ja and Bane and Jaren Jackson for the next 3-4 years. Um, unless they have heard intel that Pascal Siakam will resign in Memphis. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I think just you're probably just playing this status quo and you're going to have a quiet deadline.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the Grizzlies, like, it's such a shame because they were dealing with the whole job mess, and then he came back and gave the team some hope. They look
Yeah.
great. They did look great. Um, so now they're back at zero. So you don't know. We'll see. See what happens with
This
them.
is not the year you want to tank. There's not a lot of draft guy. Obviously, you never know, right? But right now, it looks like there's not that franchise guy that 2 years from now, you're going to be like, wow, they really lucked out having that one bad year. They were able to pair Ja with this guy. It doesn't look like that at the table right now.
Well, they don't even need a franchise. I mean, who doesn't need another franchise guy? But they could probably use another piece, maybe a big man, maybe a another a three. I don't know, like,
They could use a three, but
yeah,
so could most of the league.
right.
Yeah. All right,
Um,
Chris, anything else before we wrap up the show?
yeah, I just want to bring up quickly an RJ really shining in Toronto. We owe a big deal. I mean, the Knicks owe a big deal of their success due to those two guys. Um, and I think that they are one of they look so great in Toronto. I mean, I think they lost against the Lakers on Tuesday night, but you're really getting a chance to see them shine right now. And I think that's going to be great for their development. RJ scored what, 36 or 46 the other night?
37, I think
30,
37.
37, you're right.
Yeah.
Um, so it's good to see them really like grow in the ways that they probably couldn't have if they stayed in New York.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And RJ seemed not sad, but he was kind of just shocked that he was traded. I think apparently he was taking a nap, and then his agent called him and goes, you're going back home. You're going to Canada." And it seems like
Yeah.
he's really embraced going back home. And you know, it's it's sad to see homegrown Knicks be traded, but at the same time, this does look like the first win-win move that we've seen in the NBA in some time, right? Where both teams seem to be thriving with their new guys. And hopefully that'll continue for both sides because you and I both love RJ and quickly as well. So that's going to do it for us here on the
Well,
All Hoops
actually,
podcast. Go ahead, Chris. One
one
more thing.
one more thing before. So this was just put out by Woj. So the NBA is denying the Knicks a $7.8 million disabled player exception for the loss of Mitch Robinson.
Okay.
Because on the bright side, there's optimism that Mitch may come back from ankle surgery before the end of the regular season. So that's
Wow.
that's some good news. I mean, maybe we don't have to get a backup center then.
Well, we'll see. I mean, that'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Usually, those player exceptions, you have to basically almost guarantee that they're not going to come back before June 15th. So, like, we'll be curious to see how that plays out. I'm not expecting him to come back this year, but at the same time, that is something that's probably good news for the Knicks.
Yeah. Looking forward to getting Mitch back.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to do it for us here on the All Who's podcast. Thank you so much to Chris. Thank you so much to our amazing listeners on Spotify and Apple, our YouTube for all their seeing our faces as well. We'll be back next week to talk more NBA action. Draymond Green coming back from suspension. What should the Warriors do with him? What should the Warriors do in general? We'll get to that.
Bye, everyone.